So think of this, for almost 30 years exactly, 29, the People's Republic of China, the Chinese Communist Party, controls all of mainland China. But the United States doesn't recognize them all the way from the 50s to the 60s to the 70s. And then it's only with Jimmy Carter's administration. So Nixon, of course, and Kissinger go over there. They say, look, we can break up the communist bloc of countries on nationalist lines. And then we can start opening up to China, and we can maybe break them away from the Soviets, great power politics. This idea of if there's another great power and we get them on our side, we can use them as a bulwark against our greater foes, at that time, the Soviet Union. But they never the Nixon administration never grants China full recognition. That only comes later in 1978 with Jimmy Carter. But here's the other piece. What is it that China demands in response for normalized relations and for taking a stance against the USSR? They say you must adhere to something called the One China policy. And what's the One China policy? The One China policy means that Taiwan is part of China. Now, it's an interesting balance because, of course, if you go to Taiwan and the Republic of China, what will they say? They say Taiwan's part of China and we're the legitimate government. If you go to Beijing, what will they say? Taiwan's part of China and we're the legitimate government. So the U.S. position has always kind of been this interesting fence striding position in the middle, and that's been the status quo for all this time. In fact, President Truman once famously said that if the United States and China should ever go to war, then Taiwan would essentially be an organic, floating, giant aircraft carrier right off the coast. However, what the People's Republic has said is that should Taiwan ever attempt independence, full independence, to declare themselves not a rogue province and a former government that was in charge of the entire country, should Taiwan declare independence and try to start an entirely new country, rather than be the Republic of China, but call themselves the Republic of Taiwan, that would trigger a full-on war launched by the PRC, launched by the Red Army. They have said that's a red line for them. And so the status quo has stayed like this since 1978, the communique is signed. Every administration since then has held to this status quo. But now Xi Jinping's in power. And Xi Jinping views Taiwan as unfinished business, the same way that Putin saw Ukraine as unfinished business. And we're not going to get into all that. I'm just explaining the backstory. They see Taiwan as an integral part of China and a piece of China that had been lost to them, and they want it back.